So, when you're riding home tonight, make for the bridge with all your might. He'll be down in the hollow there. He needs your head. Look out. Beware. The main villain of Washington Irving's 1820 short story has been many times brought to life by all types of media, from the desk of Walt Disney to the mind of Tim Burton. The Headless Horseman has forever been a tall tale and ghost story since the very foundation of the United States. As the story of the Headless Horseman had existed since the closing days of the American Revolution in Tarrytown, New York, where Sleepy Hollow rests. But what is the truth behind this tale? How did it come to exist, and who was the Headless Horseman? In a strange irony, the Headless Horseman only exists because of the United States, as shocking as that may be to hear. The idea of a headless rider is actually a very common folklore. For example, in Ireland, a headless rider is known as a Dúlanan, a dark fairy who hunts the living with a spine whip. In Scotland, the sight of a headless rider references the death of a pretender to be a Scottish chieftain, and often is a signal to death coming imminently. And in German folklore, where the horseman is a revenant, or as most of us would know, a symbol of death, who with a single touch can kill their victims. But the United States Headless Horseman was forged in the fire of the American Revolution. But before we explain that, let's explain the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Especially being a New Yorker, I grew up hearing this story every summer. Well, every Halloween, not summer, sorry. A new schoolmaster, Ichabod Crane, comes to the small town of Sleepy Hollow in Hudson Valley of New York, where he falls in love with Katrina Van Tassel, the daughter of the richest man in Sleepy Hollow. Katrina, though, has another suitor, Abraham Brawn Bones Van Burnt, who is dashing, strong, and handsome. But Katrina is playing a game with the two men. At her father's Halloween party, Braun tells the story of the Headless Horseman, better known as the Headless Hessian, who rides the hollow every night, searching for his or a new head. Katrina later that evening officially denies Ichabod, and sadly he leaves the Van Tassel estate to return to his boarding room in Sleepy Hollow. On the journey, he comes to face with the ghost, who begins to pursue him and try to kill him. But he remembers from Brahm's story, if he can make it to the covered bridge, the ghost disappears. As he makes it to the bridge, the horseman throws his head, or a flaming pumpkin, depending on your storyteller. The next day, Ichabod is gone, and all that remains across the covered bridge is a smashed pumpkin, and Katrina marries Brahm. Now, this story holds two things that actually are true and connected. That is Katrina's father, Baltus Van Tassel, and the Hessian. A Hessian was a soldier that was brought to the American shores during the American Revolution by the British. They hailed from the German state of Hesse-Kassel and were a mercenary force sent to help keep the colonists in line and end the American Revolution. Famously, the Hessians slaughtered the Continental Army during the Battle of Brooklyn, and then later, on George Washington, would surprise attack them at the Battle of Trenton, where he would defeat the mercenaries. However, in the fall of 1777, the British intended to split the colonies in half in upstate New York. They would link in the Hudson Valley with over 13,000 men and split the colonies. A large group in this army were Brunswickers and Hessians, who made up a good fighting force in this larger army. This would all come to a head at the Battle of Saratoga in fall of 1777, where Benedict Arnold and Horatio Gates, but really Benedict Arnold, defeated the British Army. This would bring France officially into the war and be seen as a heroic victory celebrated across the 13 colonies. But now we get back to Sleepy Hollow, which is located at the end of the British route back to Manhattan proper. What history tells us, a Dutch landowner named Baltus Van Tassel was walking his lands in Sleepy Hollow one day in late October. He was concerned over property damage as the retreating British had been skirmishing with the Continentals as they continued to withdraw from the New York woodlands back to the city. Van Tassel found his property okay, but he discovered a single casualty, a lone Hessian decapitated from what was probably a cannon. Now, there's no one who hates the English more than a Dutchman or Irishman, but this man was not English. He was Hessian. Hessians and the Dutch shared culture and even religion, and Van Tassel did not want the man who had gone through such a gruesome death to be left alone. He returned to his estate house, got a cart, and returned to the body and carried him across the Pacento River under the covered bridge to the Dutch Reformed Church of Sleepy Hollow. With the preacher and a few groundskeepers, they quietly buried him in an unmarked grave, giving him the rights of the church as they buried him. But very soon after this, people swore they could hear random horse noises at night, and others identified what they saw as a Hessian riding in the hollow across the river from the church. This legend quickly spread, and parents and grandparents began to scare children of an angry spirit of the Hessian riding at night with his head, looking for one to replace it. 30 years later, however, Washington Irving moved to Sleepy Hollow, and he heard this legend. He interviewed the Van Tassels. Baltus had passed away already, but the family was distraught how the town believed that their father's good Samaritanship was said to have conjured this demon. But Irving loved the story, and he wrote it along with his next story, Rip Van Winkle, which also takes place in the Hudson Valley of New York. In the 1940s, another famous storyteller looked at the story of the quiet New York village. Walt Disney, who was making it his objective to show the world America's rich folklore, had decided to make an animated film about the tale. He decided to link it with an English story, The Winds and the Willows, or as we all know it, The Adventures of Mr. Toad. The film will be one of the first time not only many Americans would learn the tale, but people around the world. And with Bing Crosby singing and doing the voice of Abraham Van Brunt, the film was a success. And personally, one of my favorite things to watch around Halloween. I'm actually watching it as I'm making this video. The next large-scale interpretation of the legend of Sleepy Hollow would happen in 1999, when Tim Burton, inspired by the story and Walt Disney's cartoon, decided to take his own shot at the tale. Instead of a tall and ugly teacher, Ichabod Crane was now a clever and handsome police officer, sent to Sleepy Hollow to investigate a bunch of decapitations. The horseman, instead of being a regular Hessian soldier, was now a bloodthirsty dragoon who had traveled to America not for money, but for war and carnage. Adaptations of the tale had been told for years now, and it's time for us to bring this video to a close. But I thought this would be fun to do the history behind some spooky stories, especially one as someone who grew up in New York and often visited Sleepy Hollow. This is very ingrained in the culture of many New Yorkers, as it is our version of Salem to go visit around Halloween. Thanks again for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the video and the quick facts. If you're new to the channel or a returning viewer, please like, share, and comment, and please, please, please subscribe. We will have new content and original content up, and I'm very happy to be back. And we will see you in the next one.